Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we are going to start Unit 1, Pre-Modern Socio-Religious Political Thought in India, the Diverse Trend. Let us first have introduction about the unit. To understand modern Indian political thought, it is essential to have a broad view of the historical processes through which the modern polity has emerged. We have civilization, which is comparable with the Greek civilization, and as Plato and Aristotle are considered as the pioneers of Western political tradition, so are our ancient and medieval texts on statecraft. Whether it is the concept of monarchy, republicanism, council of ministers, welfare states, diplomacy, appellate system, or any other political concept or institution which is known in modern political parlance. All these have references in our early political traditions. State, society, and governance are interlinked to each other. If we look at our past, we will find that there was a time when people used to live in small groups based on kinship ties, and there was no need felt for an authority to control people's life. But with the growth of population and clashes between groups of people, the need was felt for an authority who would provide the required protection to his people and whose order would be obeyed by all. With the coming of groups of people together, society came into existence, which was followed by the emergence of state and the art of governance. So, in a way, we can say that individual needs lead to a emergence of society, and it is the collective need of the society which in turn led to the formation of various structures and theories related to state and governance. Thus, the socio-historical context becomes a determinant factor in the evolution of state, as well as the ideas related to statecraft. Keeping this in mind, when we look at our past, we find that starting from the Vedic society till the establishment of the British rule, India passed through various phases and also had undergone various political experiments. All these traditions and experiences, in one way or the other, have contributed in making what we call modern Indian political thought. It is not possible to deal in detail all these developments in one unit. Therefore, our focus in this unit will be to familiarize you with the major trends in pre-modern Indian political thought. With the help of historical texts like Manusmriti, Arthashastra, Fatwa-e-Jahandari, Aine-Akbari, which are considered as important treatises on statecraft. We will try to explain the evolution of the Indian political thought In the first section, we will introduce you to the tradition based on Brahminical, Buddhist, and Jain literature, then the Islamic political tradition, and finally the relationship between religion and state in India. Now we turn toward the point state and sovereignty in ancient India. In her seminal work on social formations in the mid first millennium BC, Romila Thapar has explained transition from lineage society to state. R. Thapar, History and Beyond collection of essays. In lineage society, the basic unit was the extended family under control of the eldest male member. The size of the family was dependent on economy and environment, and it was the genealogical relationship which tied the families together. It was through kinship and rituals that the chief exercised his authority over the clans. Differentiation came in within society between the rulers and the ruled because of kin connections and wealth. However, shift from the pastoral to peasant economy, population growth, social and cultural heterogeneity, along with other factors, led to the emergence of state systems. In the opinion of Romila Thapar, conquest, extensive trade, the decline of political elite, and democratic processes led to the change towards a state system. The Vedic period represented the lineage system, but later on, growing stratification in society indicated the tendency towards state formation. With the formation of state, the issue of governance of the state became a major concern of the society. In the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata, we find the reference to Matyanya, a condition in which small fishes become prey to big fishes. This analogy was given to explain the anarchic condition in a society where no authority exists. To avoid this type of crisis, people collectively agreed to have a set of laws and to appeal to the god for a king who will maintain law and order in society. It is also argued that without appealing to any divine agency, people on their own selected a person on whom the authority was vested to protect human society. We find references to both divine origin of kingship as well as social contract theory of kinship. Though theological and metaphysical environment had a strong influence in shaping the ancient Indian thinking. Various studies on ancient Indian polity suggest the emergence of polity as an independent domain. Whether it was a divine origin of kinship or social contract, we find monarchy as a dominant form of government in the early Indian polity. The seven constituents of the state, as prescribed in the Shanti Parva of Mahabharata, are as follows: Swamin or the sovereign, Amatya or the officials, Janapada or the territory, Durga or the fort, Kosa or the treasury, Danda or the army, Mitra or the allies. All these are considered as natural constituents of a state. State is visualized as an organic body having seven organs. Swamin or the king is considered as head of this structure. Next to him is the Amatya or the council of ministers through which the king governs the state. Janapada means territory having agricultural land, mines, forests, etc. Durga or fort suggests the fortification of the capital. Kosha or territory, the place where collected revenue are kept. Danda refers to the power of law and of authority. Mitra is the friendly state. Looking at this structure of state, one finds a lot of resemblance with the attributes of the modern state. Manusmriti strongly advocated for a political authority. Manu was of the opinion that in the absence of a political authority, there would be disorder in society. It is the duty of the king to ensure justice in the society and protect the weak. By taking his due, by preventing the confusion of caste, and by protecting the weak, the power of the king grows and he prospers in this and after death. From Manusmriti cited in aporal Indian political thinking, Manu was in favor of social hierarchy and caste system, and his notion of justice was based on diverse customs and practices of different castes. He suggested that though the king derived his authority from God, in practice he should be guided by the Brahmanas. The rationale behind it was the assumption that Brahmanas possessed knowledge and knowledge should rule. Manu prescribed the structure of state in terms of villages, districts, and provinces, which resembles our present day structure of administration. If one looks at the rationale behind this organizational structure, one may easily find that the principle of decentralization of authority was the guiding principle behind this organization. He also advocated an assembly of the learned as well as the officers of the state to advise the king, and this shows his concern for the public opinion. Members were expected to be objective and fearless in taking decisions on the basis of dharma. Village and district authorities were suggested to function independently and only when there was any need. The king was expected to help. Welfare of the general public was one of the major concerns of the king. If the inhabitants of the cities and the provinces be poor, the king should, whether they depend upon him immediately or meditately, show them compassion to the best of his power. Weeping the tears of the distressed, the helpless, and the old, and inspiring them with joy constitute the duty of the king. Mahabharata Shanti Parva was cited in a apodal Indian political thinking. Commenting on the political ideas explained in the Manusmriti, V.R. Mehta in his Indian political thought has remarked that it is indeed entombing to know that very early in the development of Indian political thought, the ideas of decentralization, welfare state, and public opinion are so clearly spelled out. In terms of early Indian political thought, Shastra by Kautilya gives a more detailed picture of statecraft. Scholars are of the opinion that Arthashastra is not the work of one Kautilya, and date of Kautilya is also a matter of debate among historians. It is also argued that there are interpolations in the Arthashastra. Whatever be the truth, the fact remains that Arthashastra as a text deals with various functions as well as the methods of running the state. Moving ahead of Manu, Kautilya advocated a strong monarchy, but he was not favorable to the idea of absolute monarchy. While in the earlier tradition, the king was guided by Brahminical authority, in Arthashastra, the king is considered to have the last word in all matters. On the chapters dealing with the king and his family, Arthashastra tells us as to how a king should control his senses and discharge his duties, how a king should protect himself from any threat on his life, and the importance of the selection of right counselors and priests. There is an elaborate discussion on the civil law explaining various measures required for an effective administration, and on criminal law to take care of those people who are considered as a threat to the country. Kautilya cautioned the king to be vigilant about the motive and integrity of his ministers, and also talked about general selfish nature of people, bribery and corruption inherent in administration. He suggested that through reward and punishment, the king should set a standard for others to follow. In his opinion, the king is above others but not above dharma. Here, dharma means obeying customary and sacred law and protection of his subjects' life and property. This was considered as basic duty of a king. Suggestions have also been given to deal with friendly and hostile neighbors, organization of armies for spies to keep a watch on internal and external developments. We are told that army should be placed under a divided command since this is a sure guarantee against treachery. The notion of welfare state is further strengthened in Arthashastra. The king is expected to protect agriculturists from oppression and to take care of the orphans, the aged, and the helpless. Happiness of his people should always be the concern of a wise king, otherwise, he may lose people's support. A good king should take up welfare activities in the interest of all. According to Kautilya, in the happiness of his subjects lies the happiness of a king. in their welfare, his welfare. The king shall consider as good not what pleases himself, but what pleases his subjects. Another important concept which we come across in the ancient political tradition is the concept of danda. Danda primarily implies the sense of coercion or punishment. Danda is required for discipline. If the laid down norms of the state, which are basically determined by sacred and customary laws, are not obeyed by any individual, or if anybody is involved in any activity which goes against the interest of the state, the king has every right to punish the guilty. So, disciplining the citizens was an important activity of the king. The Buddhist canonical literature suggests that the monarch should rule on the basis of the law of truth and righteousness. He should not allow any wrongdoing in his kingdom and should look after the poor. A king was considered as a chosen leader of the people, and his important duty was to protect his people and to punish the wrongdoers. Tirukkural, composed by the Tiruvalluvar during the 2nd century AD, is considered as one of the famous classics of Tamil literature. In this text, along with other facets of life, we find important ideas related to polity. It talks about an adequate army, an industrious people, ample food, resources, wise and alert ministers, alliances with foreign powers, and dependable fortifications as essentials of a state. King's qualities and duties, responsibilities of the ministers, importance of spies to keep watch on various activities within the state, diplomacy, etc., are other important issues on which we find mention in the Tirukkural. Statecrafts consist in getting support without letting your weakness be known. Though monarchy was predominant in the ancient Indian polity, references to republic are also found in literary traditions. Since Alexander the Great invasion of India in 327 to 324 BC, we come across references to many places governed by oligarchies from Greek and Roman accounts of India. Later on, the Buddhist Pali canon tells us about the existence of many republics, mainly in the foothills of the Himalayas and in North Bihar. It is suggested that these were mostly tributary to the greater kingdoms but enjoyed internal autonomy. An example of this was the Sakyas who were on the borders of modern Nepal and to whom the Buddha himself belonged. Another such example was the Vrijjalan Confederacy of the Lachvis who resisted the great Anthrastu. Steve Mohrberg, in an article entitled Democracy in Ancient India, has written that in ancient India, monarchical thinking was constantly battling with another vision of self rule by members of a guild. a village, or an extended kin group. In other words, any group of equals with a common set of interests. This vision of cooperative self government often produced republicanism and even democracy comparable to classical Greek democracy. From various accounts, the picture of North Indian between the Himalayas and the Gangas during the 6th and the 5th century BC suggests the existence of a number of Janapadas, and that this was also the period of growth of towns and cities in India. In the Janpadas, there were Sanghas or Ghanas managing independently their territory. Details of the working of such assemblies can be found both in Brahminical and Buddhist literature. From Panini's account 5th BC, we find references to the process of decision making through voting. In the Buddhist literature, we find rules concerning the voting in monastic assemblies, their membership, and their quorums. All these point to the fact that democratic values and public opinion were very much respected in ancient political tradition, in spite of the dominant trend of monarchical government. Now we want to wind up today's lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.